Welcome to the Situation Report, Episode 5, a quick and dirty guide to playing games of Scrappers. I'm your host, Bob Faust, and as a gentle reminder, I'm not a pro at this, so bear with me, but I do want to explain a few things that will help you get into your Scrappers games much faster and also help you answer any questions of the rules that aren't normal or typical of other game systems. So right now we're going to talk about WYSIWYG. This is kind of a part 2 to the conversation about the position and condition of your models during gameplay. What you see is what you get is the full version of the acronym WYSIWYG. It's a gaming term that relates to models, particularly in skirmish games, where you've got a man-to-man element and every guy's got his own unique armor and weapons and equipment, which we in this game call gear. WYSIWYG helps players stay within reason of what they're carrying on their figure. So for example, we want to make sure that they're representing the general type of weapon, general type of armor, or general type of equipment that they would use, and that we're not substituting or assuming the opponent knows that the backpack on my model's back is actually a flamethrower, etc. So this is a way to keep your games clean and fun. It's not a tournament set. This is a friendly game, first and foremost, and a campaign game. And we understand that sometimes modeling the new artifacts, new equipment and gear that you'll find during your Scrapper games might become a bit of a trouble. But by and large, we all love this hobby for the conversion and modeling aspect for the most part. And so we look forward to the opportunities to do that. Let me give you a few ideas as to how we use WYSIWYG and what it does and does not cover. I don't want anyone to get too draconian or pedantic about the rule. Remember that you need to talk about these things before the game starts with your opponent so that you don't get that mixture of tension, victory or loss, and rules lawyering all bunched up together. So let's go ahead and look at my Architect Commander. He's a pig iron system scavenger. I also use one of the pig iron leader heads with the beret. He's got a backpack and machine gun there, a submachine gun there. I also took the helmet that was the System Trooper helmet that I was going to use for this model. You see it right there. Cut it, trimmed it, and placed it over his hip so that I can purchase that as an actual piece of gear in the game, because a helmet is something that you have to show on the model. It has to be a protective head covering of some kind, and a beret just won't cut it. So that's the first good example of WYSIWYG. You can see that my model's got a helmet attached on him. He can use the helmet gear. This other model over here, the other architect I did the exact same thing for. But let's say I wanted to do this with this pig iron colony feral that I'm using as a Son of Entropy mutant. He doesn't have anything that would really be considered a head covering, so it wouldn't be what you see is what you get if I were to buy him a helmet. That's a good example of where we need to figure out about drawing the lines. He also has a giant machine gun. Now I could represent this in the game as regularly, like an assault rifle, but I'll probably want to buy it as a machine gun. At the same time, it wouldn't be prudent for me to take this model's standard basic long arm and try and pretend that it's a machine gun like this model's. That's another example of where you want to stay closer to what your individual figure sculpt looks like. So I could get away with making this either an auto shotgun or a shotgun. I could make it a assault rifle or even a standard rifle, and that would be within the WYSIWYG rules. But for an actual machine gun, I need something that's going to be a little bit beefier and truly look the part. All right, let's go to some other examples. What you see is what you get. Can also apply to mutations, but not always. Any mental mutation that your models have during the campaign, or you start with the game, doesn't have to be physically represented, of course, because it's a mental mutation. But we do want to have something by way of the physical mutations. So let's say this guy had the organic weapons and he took the strangler. That would be an appropriate rule to have these two giant tentacles coming out of him. Now, of course, this is an incredibly impressive piece that our friend Chris Wolf painted up and put together. And, for a practical game of Scrappers, those tentacles are going to be considered body proper, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. So that might be, make it a little bit harder for people to, or for him to hide from being shot or targeted. But he can always ambush. When you get to the action section, of the video series, you'll understand why that's an important deal. But that's another example of how we like to make sure that when we look at the models, they're fairly well representing what they've got. Now, last one is an example here. This guy has a flamethrower, and it, it's pretty clear that way. But, what if he actually had in the game got a laser rifle as an artifact? It could be argued that this could be a crude version of that, but it's up to the players. We're not going to be the ones setting that precedent. It's between you guys. You know what collections you have. You know how much or how little you want to be nitpicking on this stuff. So go with it. Play with it yourself. But if we do have tournaments or group competitions that are official Scrappers events, we do want people to be aware that they need to stick closely to the WYSIWYG rules. All right. That all being said, let's get on and talk about body proper and line of sight. Before models in Scrappers can either make a ranged attack or a close combat charge against enemy models, they first must draw a line of sight to that model. Now, one of the gaming conventions that we use in Scrappers is kind of an all-or-nothing system. This prevents us from having a whole list of different modifiers based on individual situations that tend to bog down play and take some of the elegance and intuitiveness out of a alternating activation game system. So what we want to do is show how the all or nothing, I have cover, I have concealment or I don't, I have a line of sight or I don't, is applied in the rules. First off, let's talk about what is body proper. In games of Scrappers, body proper is a way in which we show what parts of the model are available to be seen for determining a line of sight from an attacker. When determining a line of sight, you always look at the eye from the eye level view of the model. Even if it's got a head with no eyes, as is the case from the CP model's alien head that I stuck on this colony feral from Pig Iron. See that there? That dude has no eyeballs. So we're going to pretend anyway that that's about where we're targeting from. And you want to be cool about it and go over to that kind of thing with your friend in the beginning before you start play. So going back to this guy, the body proper covers anything attached to the model's base, its legs, torso, arms, so in other words, just limbs, because this guy's not really got a limb. I mean, he's got a limb, he doesn't have an arm, he's got a big tentacle. Heads, multiple, and anything worn on the model. Worn, but not carried. Now we'll get to that in a moment. Worn, of course, in this case would be he's wearing a helmet, he's got a backpack, everything on the backpack, his legs, torso, arms, head, and any part of this base counts as body proper. So, if an enemy model can see him, any part of his body proper, he has a line of sight. If all he can see from the model is something the model is carrying in its hands, or tentacles, whatever, such as the gun, then that doesn't count. So if the only thing he could see was the gun poking out from the side of a building, you could not draw a line of sight to this guy. He would be out of view. But if this were the case here and we saw the backpack, even just a part of it, it would be considered line of sight. It's kind of a game abstraction if you stop and think about it. It's not literal. We can't be that way. We're playing with toy soldiers, for God's sake. So we got to remember that some of these guys are moving around. They're taking up a particular area. They're hiding. They're looking. They're peeking. They're moving around and stuff. There's a lot of abstraction to this. But what it represents is whether or not we've got an ability to see and identify a target. All right. So that's body proper. What is concealment? Well, concealment, let's back this out a bit. Concealment is when something other than another model, so that could be terrain, that could be a scrap token, that could be smoke, anything but a model. Models never provide concealment for each other. Anytime something prevents a completely clear line of sight to be drawn to the entire body proper of the enemy model, it has concealment. So in this case, this shipping container here will be considered a piece of terrain. And while he can draw a model's eye view to get a line of sight, this part of its actual viewpoint is blocked partially by the corner of this. So in that case, we get this model concealment. because he's got something that's poking in between. So in real life, it would be a much more difficult thing to draw a line of sight around than it is here in our static display. So when you're firing onto someone in range combat, they are defending with 1d10, and their combat rating gets cut in half. Now, when we get into the nuts and bolts in other episodes as to how the combat system works, you'll understand that this is a huge deal. Because if he has no concealment, he is a straight combat half on 1d10. If he has concealment, he defends at his full combat rating. So if this guy's combat rating was a 5, and he was out in buck open, he would be at a 2. So he'd roll a d10 plus 2, that'd be his defense check. But with just something concealing part of his body proper, that gives him concealment, which allows him to make that same defense check with his full combat of 5 instead of the modified combat half. That is a big deal. So, now you understand WYSIWYG, body proper, and line of sight. We'll call it quits for this episode. We'll be back in episode 6, and we'll start talking about actions and what they do and how to make them. Thanks.